100th game in only 10 seasons. Bob Jastrab, whether it's a win or loss for him, he'll still figure out a way to get to 100, maybe even more than that, of course, this year. And he's looking to win, what is it now, his third state championship in the last 6 or 7 years. These are two of the most winningest programs, not only in California, but in the nation, according to junior college, and two of the most stalwart teams when it comes to producing Division I talent. As, boy, you take a look at some of these players, and you can just place these guys straight onto NCAA starting rosters next year, as that's where they're head up. And I personally believe that it's going to come down to the defensive run game. Can they stop these running backs? Personally, this is going to be a game for the ages, guys. Maybe the first of many more great close calls between Mount Sac and Riverside to come.
Yeah, it's certainly a rivalry in the making. Dan, you've been broadcasting along with Nick for Riverside football all season long. It seems as if there's only 3 legitimate, really, really good teams in Southern California: Mount Sac, Long Beach, and Riverside. Riverside, they haven't faced a really, really good team per se. Fullerton, that was a good win. El Camino off of the loss against Grossmont in the bye week, that was a good win for Riverside, and they were able to escape Saddleback College in double overtime. But let's face it, Dan, this is Riverside's first real test of the season, and from what you told me about the LA Harbor game, they didn't look to the best of their ability. They didn't play to the best of their ability against a very weak LA Harbor team. Dan, what's your opinion of Riverside going into this matchup against the number 1 team in Southern California? Are they ready for the big stage?
I think so. You can mark it down as a W. RCC, they have an explosive offense that nobody is really talking about because it's still brand new. And it just barely started in, I would say, week 4 against El Camino. That loss against Grossmont doesn't mean anything anymore. It's a team that has 400 yards per game on offense, statistically. So that speaks thousands of words for me. And then let's not take away, I feel like they've got the best defense in the state. And so you put that together, and that's the perfect formula for a complete team. I mean, Nick will tell you about special teams. He knows it best. But it's a team that's totally complete. And the good thing is, it's week 7, and it's finally coming together. So it's right here is the midway point, and from here on out, I expect them to play all out. Last week, it was just an aberration. They didn't open up the playbook. They were working on stuff. And so, Chris, I would say they are a legitimate number 1 team.
But they're not ranked number 1, Dangadino.
That's not today. I do want to mention something else, though. Sorry to steal your fire there, Dan. But go ahead. The funny thing is, when you take a look at these teams, there's a couple differences. First and foremost, for Mount Sac, they are a little less mistake-prone. The penalties aren't nearly as costly for them, and the turnover is obviously been a huge issue for Riverside, where the Tigers have lost 11 fumbles this year, and not to mention we lead the entire state in penalties. We are a mistake-prone team, but a very talented ball club. If we can get that together, I think we could beat a Mount Sac team that, despite the very clean play, I mean, I've been very impressed. You're 3rd downs among the best in the state. You're the top 5 scoring offense in California to go along with number 2 in scoring defense. Number 1 in the state in sacks. It's been very impressive what the Mountains have been able to put up on the board. But the lone difference is, I think, if Riverside can not turn the ball over and those big mistakes, if they can clean their act for 1 week, I think they can beat a team where offensively, I think, are limited at the quarterback position. Justin Allo, a sophomore who wasn't even going to be not even a backup at his former University of Hawaii. He comes over to Mount Sac, still doesn't play until this season, and has put up relatively solid numbers. But when you look at the receiving core that he's playing with, I think if you're able to shut down those receiving targets, Allo's a little limited, and if the Tigers cannot make a big mistake, I think they'll have the upper hand in this game. It'll come down to who in the world can dominate the turnover battle. It all comes down to Saturday night.
I just think.
I have a question though. For you, Chris.
Yeah.
If RCC cleans up penalties and wins the turnover game, are they not the number one team in the state? I mean, with what they've got now.
Well, I think, like you said, you could throw the Grossmont game out the window, but when you're doing rankings, when you're making the rankings, as whoever puts those together, the committee or whatever you want to call them, you can't throw that game out the window. You see it in college football. If Alabama were to lose a game against, let's say, Tennessee, no disrespect to Tennessee, but they're not a very good program right now, in week 2 of the season, and they're just coasting through the rest of the season, you're not going to see them at number 1 just yet. They haven't taken down a top dog yet, and if they take down number 1 Mount Sac Saturdays, sure, put them at number 1. But as of right now, they're still, in my mind, not the number 1 team in Southern California. I think that's up in the air. I think they're a contender for the number 1 team in SoCal, but Mount Sac, the loss at Long Beach City College, the loss against Chaffee. All 3 teams have been inconsistent in a way so far this year, and all 3 teams are 1-loss teams. So these teams aren't perfect. These teams have lost a game, but these teams know how to win games as well. So I think it's all going to come down to the matchup Saturday to see who the real number 1 is.
And then the matchup next week, I think even with if Riverside were to win, then they still would have to win against Long Beach to be the number 1 dog. And that's just for the regular season. Mount Sac, same deal. They could be number 1, but then they can beat us. But then I think they have to win.
The better team talent-wise. Now, do I think they're a better team altogether? No, but I don't know that for a fact. You guys watch RCC week in and week out. I watch Mount Sac week in and week out. So that's why I'm very intrigued to not only see if the Mounties can get it done, but to see what kind of team RCC really is. What kind of team RCC is going to be against the number 1 team. They got the home field advantage. Excuse me. They got some momentum as well. Obviously, with, like you said, Dan Gadino, 3,000 plus coming through to the jungle this week. But I just think that the fact that RCC beat Mount Sac last year, and this is a veteran Mount Sac team, there's a lot of second-year players for Mount Sac. Justin Allo, Gilchrist, a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball, Loney Fa, Taekwon Glass, Aaron Simpson, Ryan Simpson, a lot of sophomores. They went to Wheelock last year, and they blew the game against RCC. I think Mount Sac was up 26-10 at the half and ended up losing 29-26. So as great of a coach as Coach Kraft is, I think Coach Jastrab a little bit better, and I think that's going to be the deciding factor in this one. I think he's going to get 100, and oh boy, will it be a big victory for him.
That'd be huge. I mean, Jastrab is one of those underrated as of late because of the emergence of Fullerton and now, obviously, of Long Beach City College. One other thing that I thought was interesting is that if I look at, and in a lot of cases, college comes down to college football, the head coaches. I think the best head coaches win and win with regularity, and obviously Mount Sac has done that with Jastrab, but the number 1 right now, I believe, coach in the conference has to be Jastrab. Now, this year, a lot of returners, but I don't necessarily think they're the more talented right now. So I think with that whole turnover deal, it's can Jastrab force Riverside to play like they kind of have, mistake prone, or can they be a team that in Riverside uncharacteristically stops the turnovers and stops the penalties?
Well, I'll tell you what, Nick. Mount Sac, they've been heavily penalized in the last couple of games as well. So, and they had two turnovers in the first half against Citrus before they cleaned it up and went on a 38-0 nothing run to take down the Owls. But I will tell you this, that I feel Mount Sac, the pressure's on them, because if Mount Sac loses, there's a very, very small chance that they can get to the postseason. If Riverside loses, they still have a chance the next week to take down Long Beach and put themselves in a position to get into the postseason.
I looked at the board, and with 2 wins, Riverside clinches it. They clinch the playoffs.
Exactly. But here's the thing: they clinch the conference with 2 wins, but and they clinch a postseason berth if they lose Saturday and win against Long Beach, and then finish out with a win against Chaffey College, Citrus College. So I mean, it's not easy for Riverside. Chaffey, the upset over Long Beach, and Citrus, they were able to hang with Mount Sac for a half. So can't overlook those teams as well. But if you're Riverside and you win these next 2 games against the top dogs, Long Beach and Mount Sac, you got to feel really, really good about your chances of getting into the postseason. But here's the thing: Mount Sac, they've had their backs against the wall the last 2 weeks. So I think it kind of favors them in the sense that, the last 2 weeks, obviously they weren't going to lose to Grossmont. There was a small chance that they'd lose to Citrus, but they still played with their backs up against the wall, knowing if they came away with a loss, they probably wouldn't put themselves in a position for a postseason berth. And I think the same...
Actually, one more interesting thing before we get back to your point. Riverside last year, before they squeaked it out against Mount Sac to push them out of the playoffs, they played all the top dogs. They played the Fullerton and the Long Beach City College earlier in the year. This season, we have yet to play Long Beach, and Fullerton obviously is not the same team. So Mount Sac is more battle-tested and have put up slightly better numbers. That's an interesting situation, even though both teams have their back up against the wall.
Nick, it's really a game that could go either way. And it sounds cliche, but it's a coin toss, and I think Mount Sac's going to win. My gut is telling me Mount Sac's going to win, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if RCC was able to get their 3rd victory over the Mounties in the last 4 years. But I will say this, like I mentioned, Mount Sac heavily penalized the last couple games. Turnovers have been a slight issue for the Mounties. They had 1 against Grossmont, they had 2 against Citrus. So I think Mount Sac knows. I think if Riverside can take an early lead, I think the Mounties will start to feel the pressure and start to make the mistakes. So what's key for Mount Sac in this one, guys, is the Mounties getting off to a good start. If the Mounties can get off to a good start, they're not going to stop. Coach Jastrab's that good of a coach where he's not going to let his guys breathe for a minute. He's going to make them grind out there 15 minutes each quarter and make sure that they bring it home. If they get off to a good start. If they don't get off to a good start, that's big-time trouble for the Mounties.
Well, I think that Nick King is the type of guy that, even with a slight deficit, can still make plays with his feet and his arm that can really, with his dual threat ability, cause him huge concerns. I don't know about you, Dan, but I personally believe that the better quarterback, Nicholas King, has an opportunity that, even with a deficit, could make some plays to kind of put him back in the game.
Yeah, he definitely is the type of guy who's a game changer. I mean, I'm so disappointed about last week, despite their win, good for RCC, but they didn't unleash Nicholas King. I would have loved to see Nicholas King put a 56-plus on LA Harbor, but unfortunately they kept the playbook. They still want him to develop some more because he hasn't been a starter throughout the whole season, coming in week 3 in the second quarter, or was it week 4 in the second quarter, excuse me. And so since then, he's taken over. It's official. He's the starting quarterback. And like you said, Nick, he's the type of guy who's definitely going to be something that Mount Sac should keep an eye for. But it is a coin toss. These are home offenses all of a sudden. Both teams are racking up over 400 yards. So, hey, the coin toss is up in the air. Let's see how it lands.
Yeah, it should be a good one Saturday from Wheelock. It's Dan Godino's favorite segment of the discussion. Prediction time. I'll save mine for last because I think I'll be the lone answer for the Mounties. I guess I just gave it away. But let's start with Dan Godino. Dan, score prediction and a little bit of analysis for this upcoming game on Saturday.
A little bit of analysis. You said it. I say Coach Chalkstrap goes back to Walnut, and RCC presses them up 42-35.
Nick Rice.